delighted to see so many people here today for this very topical and indeed very vital issue. And indeed just, obviously about surviving a major cybersecurity attack. And I think we spend a lot of our time now thinking about how we tackle major issues, Brexit, COVID, climate change. And we're in danger, I think, at times of hyperbole when we think about just the impact of all of these. But a major cybersecurity attack quite clearly is an existential threat to all of us. And it's great that we've got people here today who are going to discuss what happens if this happens to you and also how we can prevent it. So I'm delighted that we've got Gina McIntyre from the Special EU Projects Body who will talk about SEUPB's experience in terms of dealing with a cyber attack. And also extremely pleased that Joe Dolan, the head of the Northern Ireland Cybersecurity Centre, is here to again advise on what we might all do about this. And I think the starting point is this could happen to any of us. And I think the issue is perhaps not if, but when. And aside from Gina's experience, you don't have to look around far to see how big organizations have been massively impacted by this. I was talking a few weeks ago to Terry Ahern, who some of you may remember was head of the Environment Agency here, and he's now in charge of SEPA in Scotland, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. They were subject to a major cyber attack on Christmas Eve, which basically took out their whole IT capacity, even though there weren't that many files actually stolen. But Terry posts regular updates on the SEPA website, and the latest shows that they reckon it'll be 2022 before they fully recover from this. And equally, you will all, I'm sure, be aware of the impact that the cyber attack on the HSE in Dublin has had. And again, when you look at the fairly regular reports which they post on their website, that has had a major impact on their ability to provide vital health and care services to citizens. So this really is an existential threat. And what we learned this morning is that there's much we can and indeed should be doing. And I'm particularly grateful that Joe was here to talk about the role of the Cybersecurity Centre. So we'll start with further ado with Gina giving us a presentation on SEUPB's experience. And can I just say, we'll run through the two presentations, but if people have questions, could they please use the chat facility so that we can build up a range of questions, which we can then manage during the rest of the event. And there will be plenty of time for questions, and Anne will moderate that. So Gina, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, David, and good morning, everybody. And if you could just arrange then to share the slides, that'd be great. Just move on to the second one. Thanks very much. Well, really, I just want to give you this our view of the incident from a business administration sort of viewpoint. I'm not going to go into really technical cyber talk, but believe me, you need to actually understand some of those terms, and you need to understand them very quickly when it happens. And Joe's going to do all the proper technical aspects. As I said, I'm just going to talk about what we learned as an organisation and some of the administration aspects that would be really useful to pass on. And I think, if I can even share just some things that make it a little bit easier when it happens, because believe me, it will. It will be worthwhile doing this just for ease of dealing with the incident. I mean, as David there was mentioning, that other organisation in Scotland got hit on Christmas Eve. Well, we were hit here on the 19th of July. So it was, 1 a.m. in the morning or just before it. I got a text from my IT manager, who I think is on the call as well, who was in Kerry on his holidays last summer. And I was reading an article in the Irish Times, that's why I was still up, saying about a Kilkenny TD was talking about Irish companies need to be better prepared for cyber attacks because of COVID. Then I get this text from Seamus and I'm like, this is not happening. This is not happening. And I think the first thing that you can imagine is a bit of denial. It's like, this can't be happening to us. We're secure. We organisation in Northern Ireland. This can't be happening. With traditional IT structure, we're compliant with appropriate IT security standards in our systems, compliant with baseline cybersecurity standards. We've all firewalls, virus checks. Sure, how can this be happening? Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. And then you discover it is. And you move into that sort of protection mode and that crisis reaction mode. And of course, you have your business continuity plan, you've all of that. But when you're sitting at 1 a.m. in the morning, the Sunday morning, with your IT manager in Kerry and my corporate services director in Donegal with no signal on his phone, let me tell you, your business continuity plan goes right out the window. Because all we could do was start going, right, what can we do immediately? What can we protect? And the first thing we did was send a WhatsApp. And because of COVID, we had all our managers on a WhatsApp contact list, and we sent them messages saying, do not let your staff log on. Get on to them first thing. Don't let them log on. We started looking at freezing bank accounts. Now, that was a precaution. It was never really at risk. But when you're facing that, you don't know what's at risk. So you're not leaving anything to chance. So you start doing things like that. Called the business continuity team together. Seamus already was starting to cut all the contacts, all the outside links between offices. Luckily, as an IT manager, he carries his laptop with him, even on holidays. So we were fortunate he was able to start doing that. And the only reason it was discovered at that time was because we have the massive IT team we have of two. The other one, Michael, was up because he had a new baby. And he was up late and he was just doing some routine work, getting a laptop ready for somebody, and discovered it. And so by the morning we knew it was a malware actually known as Matrix, but it was a ransom note appeared on the PCs. And we've never faced this before. And your business continuity plan, or at least ours, didn't have what do you do when you discover a live incident and you're in the middle of it. It didn't have that, so it's extremely unsettling. You don't know what you've lost. You don't know what they've got. You don't know if they're still in the system. You don't know if they're watching what you do. You don't know if you're expecting a phone call with right, we've now got your data, we're releasing it. You just don't know anything. And I came in here, Seamus was driving up from Kerry, he spent the whole time making phone calls to everybody that he had to connect with. Michael came in here and was literally, they were taking wires out of every server. It was like something out of Doctor Who, they were knee deep in wires and cables just to contain the incident. We knew a cyber expert who was an ex-colleague of ours, actually worked in internal audit in the civil service, and we just managed to stay in touch, and we got on to him, and so he was able to tell us, you're doing the right thing, you're doing what you need to do. And business continuity plan, when your systems go down, you have nothing. I had a paper copy of the business continuity plan in my boot of my car because I'm a geek. Seamus obviously is an IT geek. He had all his kept separate, but you have no access to anything in your system. So if your business continuity plan is sitting lovely in one of your trim folders, forget it. You're not going to get at it. But we discovered very quickly as well that the project data wasn't affected. It sits on a standalone server, and that was a big relief for us, because at least we knew all of that information was protected. But you can imagine Stanton looking around a room at banks and banks and banks of PCs, none of which could be turned on, and all of the information in them at that point was non-accessible. And I can tell you, it is not a pretty place to be. The other thing that is really difficult to deal with at the time is also the Information Commissioner's requirements, because lack of access to data, and in this case, I say only lightly, was our staff details, bank pay details, names, contact addresses, that type of thing, was inaccessible. But that's a breach. And I don't know if any of you have actually ever tried to work through a breach document, but when you actually don't know what it is you've lost, how many, you don't have the numbers to hand of exactly what staff numbers you have or who you have or what it is, and you're trying to do that. It was an absolute perfect storm because of COVID. It was the July holidays. Now, we believe in the end, with all the investigation that was done, that it was a random attack. But that's the time they attack you. Weekends, holiday time, July holidays here, they obviously knew something was going on, although they've been brute forcing us to attack our systems for quite some time, and from May, I believe. But you're sitting there in the middle of the night, you don't know what to do, and you don't know who to talk to, and you can do nothing in the middle of the night. And then, thank goodness, you just go into the whole the crisis management of the ICO requirements. But you've 72 hours, and you are sitting with, as I say, you don't know what's going on. You're not sure what you've lost. You don't know what you can't get access to, and yet you're not even allowed to tell your data subjects that their information may be violated. And that's a very difficult personal thing, because you want to warn people to be vigilant to their bank accounts and things like that, just in case they have taken the data, as I say, but you're not allowed to do it, because if you'd ever looked at the ICO requirements, you'll see that you can't inform anybody until you inform them. So those 72 hours were really difficult to make sure that we got everything together. And because of COVID, you didn't have the people in the office who could even get into their desks to maybe pull out paper files. We had to make all the contacts that we do on our business continuity plan, our sponsor departments, legal team, audit and risk committee. Then, as I say, our IT manager there was contacting the PSNI, the Garda, Action Fraud, National Cybersecurity Centre. I mean, there's so many people to contact. And then we needed an incident recovery team, because a team of two is not going to do it and to know how to manage it. So we were able to go and get PwC in at short notice. But you're sitting with a ransom note, and as I say, you don't know what they're going to do, and you don't know what they've got. And the biggest challenge is said the business continuity plan just goes straight out the window in relation to dealing with it there and then. And that's one of the things I would say, make sure at all times that's up to date. We've carried out all the tabletop exercises. We've done that. But you're doing that whenever you're coming into the room together at a certain time with a cup of coffee. You're not doing that at 1 a.m. in the morning, or Christmas Eve, or a Sunday night, or a Friday evening, So I think that's something that you need to be very, very careful of. And even I would suggest prepare your templates on the ICO, look at what you have to do, because I'm sure not many people have actually looked at the specifics of when you can report to your data subjects, when you can't, what you should let know. And that's the other thing that you have to be really mindful of in this, is keeping the circle tight, because during those 72 hours, you cannot let this go public. You can't let it go out in the way that, you call for help. So it's a really tight circle that you have to keep. And that's one of the biggest lessons that we learnt, was to manage our expectations, because you're contacting the PSNI cyber squad, you're contacting cyber agencies, expecting them to answer. That's totally unrealistic. They're not going to do that. We didn't have a Joe at that stage to contact, and a team like that. And that we were working through the others, but PSNI don't help with post incidents, even though it was a live incident. The cybersecurity agency wasn't even going to get back to us for 48 hours. We're just too small for them. But we were able to look at the cyber agency in Ireland as well, and they did take copies of the data and responded to us to tell us that they didn't have the encryption key, because sometimes that's the other thing you're trying to find out, is somebody been through this before and has the key. But you have to get trusted advisors around you quickly to work through it. Then I suppose the next thing is the prioritizing your needs. You have to decide what it is you're going to do, what's the most important thing to use in an organization, because you've got people coming at you with all different wants and requirements. You're thinking about getting back to your data, getting back into your systems. You've the ICO reports to do, and they're difficult when you don't know what you don't know. They're really difficult to do, and they look simple, but they're not when you have no details and no access to your data. You have to decide, you have to keep information for investigation purposes, but at the same time you're wanting to get your systems back up and running. So you have to decide on your priorities, what systems you want first. And to me, you have to really stick to those. It's important you make your decisions and you stick to them. Your data people, your management people are busy doing what they have to do, pulling out leads and scrubbing servers and doing all of that. And everybody else has to work around them. So we did set up a separate team to look at the ICO, that whole aspect to it. So that was really, we were very fortunate. If you just move on to the next slide, thanks. We were very fortunate in that we were able to get back up and running very quickly within 5 weeks. And that was because we had our backup, which we were unsure of for the first couple of days if it was untouched or not, and I'll explain why. We came fully functional again sort of by the end of the summer. We had some emails for senior management back up within 2 days. And that's the other, trying to even you've nobody to contact, emails, you've nothing. You end up using maybe a personal email to try and contact another manager, and just have to be so careful of all of that. And it's just a really complex situation to manage. So what I would strongly advise in some recommendations, and believe me, these are only some of the lessons, but you'll understand from maybe what I've said why. We did emerge much stronger than ever before. We're very aware of the risks now, and we'll never, ever take them for granted. Some of the recommendations, if and when it does happen, is, for me, some of the business side is to keep a log of everything during the incident. And I don't mean just the official incident log that you have to do, but the first thing I did was grab a little book, a notebook, and you just start writing, because you're talking to so many people. You're dealing with so many aspects, you can't remember, sequencing of events, exact sequencing. So it's really important to keep that with you at all times. The ICO, I would suggest you have them ready. You look at your templates and you have them sitting ready, and you keep them updated. And what I've heard is actually now that they've become so sophisticated that sometimes you do have insurance potentially for cyber, which will pay for some of the security experts you have to bring in at the time. But they've become so sophisticated, apparently they're even going in and digging around your data, and they'll find out what insurance you have, and that's what they'll blackmail you for. So it's important to keep your insurance up to date as well. But what you have to do before any of this is obviously consider what's the most valuable assets in your organization. What do you need in a crisis? And so what we've done is, following this, is obviously we've got a standalone source now of the most important information for handling any incident, such as your business continuity plan, details, bank details, contact details, because that we froze the bank first thing that morning, just as a precaution. And if you've ever tried to freeze a bank account, you'll realize it's not easy when they're asking for a work email to tell them to freeze the bank account and give them authority. I mean, everything just goes out the window of what you think is your traditional way of communication. Increasing security in every way possible is so important. So we try to encrypt anything that would be data that would breach your data commissioners. Training staff and keeping them regularly updated is vital, especially as we're working remotely. And end user is so vulnerable in relation to some of this, allowing these things maybe to happen by accident. I would suggest you call a crisis meeting at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, or 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, or during a holiday time, and see what the response is and see how you handle it. Keeping your business continuity plans up to date. And the other thing that is really, really, I can't emphasize enough, keep them short. We had a lovely business continuity plan this size, lots of things in it, lots of people to contact. When you're in that crisis, you need to have one page in front of you, the contact numbers, names, what you need to do. You can't start wading through, and if this happens, we move to this, and if that happens, it's just, you need incident management crisis. So next slide, please, thanks. What we did as well, we put that night, actually, we arranged from in the middle of the night, we were arranging for the website to carry information to communicate with all our stakeholders that our systems were down, and to contact people by phone. So, the communication crisis response goes in as well. But what we're looking at now is about, testing everyone and everything randomly. It's no point in doing it, as I said, when it's nice and planned. Vigilant is most important because of people working remotely. Off-site backups was something, because of COVID, we had stopped doing, because nobody would come to pick them up anymore. So we had off-site backups up until March, when we left the building. And at least we knew that worst came to worst, we would have those. But it's important that you make sure your processes that you're not thinking about now because you're not in the office, make sure they're still operational. Revisit your risks to the organisation regularly, your contact for your staff, your stakeholders. We were able to procure services from an external organisation, that was PwC, to provide that expertise in managing the incident. Smaller organisations and businesses might find it more difficult because of the cost. Get your support contracts and call lists in place well before you need them. Don't wait until the day, because that we didn't know it was going to happen to us. But the other thing, don't expect anything and expect nothing, because you will not maybe get the support that you think you're going to get. Not through anybody's fault. It's just that's the way it is. You need an incident team. Next slide, please. And next slide, thanks. So what we've done, obviously, we've got a cybersecurity specialist around us, CIFRA, and indeed I've stolen this slide from them. This is one that they prepared for us. This is some of the actions we've taken, and we thought we were okay before. You know, we thought we were compliant. Well, we were compliant. We'd passed an audit just 6 months before saying you're, satisfactory on your security. So these are the type of things we put in now. We've replaced firewalls with new generation firewalls, the endpoint protection, which is the end user who's sitting at home. We have a CISO, or Chief Information Security Officer, and they look at threat assessments, CIFRA. They do all this for us. We've new cloud-based remote access solutions. As I said, I'm not going to bore you with all of this because Joe will do all the technical stuff properly, but it's all about looking at your threats, and it's all about just looking at all your perimeters and making sure. And if you flick on the next slide, please, making sure that you're fully protected. We've completed a business impact assessment, identifying information assets and giving us time to really consider them, because you think, oh, that one maybe isn't that important. And then you realize that information is that important, because if that got out that you'd lost that information, it would really do damage to the organization. And HSE, I complain about ours being horrific. But can you imagine how every time I think of HSE and lives at risk, it's just unthinkable. My stomach flips when I think about what they've had to go through the last few weeks. So we undertook cybersecurity. We're looking now to move to cyber maturity assessment on our systems. As you see, we have the security information and constant monitoring of our firewalls and anything that's happening, and advanced visibility and notification of threats. We've signed up to Joe's team as well. I wish we'd had Joe at the time and all that he can bring. Flip on the next slide, please. It doesn't end here. Next one, thanks. We recently had another attempt, which thankfully came from China, but again, they were out and they were doing brute force on the checking the firewalls, they're looking for vulnerabilities. But with the monitoring that CIFRA now have in place for us, it was picked up, and there was nothing happening. Thank goodness they didn't get in, they didn't find anything or any way in. But that just shows you it is happening. But now we're very aware of it. Last slide, thanks. Still to do. As I said, they've recently picked up that persistent access attempts from the address in China, but we've been doing, lots more. I can't even tell you all that we've been doing, but as I say, Joe will do the technical aspect, but we're doing, duo two-factor authentication. We're also doing security awareness training and phishing exercises. So that means that we'll go and test staff to make sure they don't click on an email that are very convincing and that actually is letting them into the systems. Encryption of database systems and procurement of penetration testing constantly for firewalls on a regular basis. And the list will go on and go on and go on, because we cannot keep ahead of these guys. They're criminals and they're doing this, and this is their job. And it's all we can do is try to keep up to date, and that's why you need to have the specialists around you. We're not cyber experts. We were on our way to doing cyber courses. We were doing emails with staff. We were thinking we were doing everything right, but when you actually get into it, look at what you're doing. This is, you think this is almost in the spy category, but this is what's out there, and this is what's going to affect every organization. Just the last slide. We all face the same threat, so it's important for me to share this information, and in that if we can help in any way, I'm happy to talk to anybody. As I said, I'm not an IT or cyber expert, but just from what we did within the business, the certain incidents in public sector, we should be able to avail of some resources. As I said, I wish we'd had Joe's team there. I wish we'd that had been in action whenever this happened to us. But I think it's important for these arrangements to be put in place, not just for us, but for other cross-border bodies and NDPBs who are outside of the system and don't have access to the big teams that can help out, such as inside the civil service. I'm going to leave it there, I think, until later, and I'll let Joe do all the proper technical talk. Thanks.
Great, Gina. Thank you very much. I think that was a really compelling and utterly sobering presentation, and huge amounts for us all to think about. So thank you, and thank you for actually suggesting that you would share the story with our members. So on that, we will hand over to Joe now to give us all a little bit of reassurance and confidence about what we can do to manage the threat and to manage the impact if and when it does hit us. So over to you, Joe. Thanks.
Let me just find where to share here. Disabled sharing. Can you give me co-host again, please? So hopefully everybody can see that okay, yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank Gina for sharing the story. Sometimes whenever we go out and do these events, people just see the headlines and it's, yeah, okay, people have lost money, people have lost data, but they don't really get the true story behind this. And it's only whenever you hear it, hopefully we have time of a bit of a video to show here. It's only when you hear it, you see it happening, you realize the impact and the emotional impact on the organization at that time, and the length of time that it actually takes to recover. And I think that's something that doesn't really come across in some of the big headline stories. When you talk about weeks to recover, that's quite fast. You know, we talked about the Scottish Environment Protection Agency still recovering, the same with Redcar and Cleveland still recovering. And obviously it's going to take a long time for the folks down south to recover their services as well. So this isn't something you bounce back quickly, and hence the need for much more better preparation for all this. But look, I have a lot to cover here. I'm really going to canter through this. And what I would say is I'm more than happy to come to any of the boards or risk and audit committees for any of the people here to take this here through at whatever level you want to try and get this conversation going. So look, my name, for those, some people do know me here, Joe Dolan. I head up the Northern Ireland Cybersecurity Centre. Have been doing that for the last sort of year. We launched in February 2020. Really good timing in terms of continuity planning, because we then straight into COVID. So we totally had to change absolutely how we were going to deliver what we were going to deliver. But that's part of it. It's about being resilient, it's about being resourceful, and it's about tackling the problems head on and dealing with them. I'm a career civil servant, been in civil service IT profession for 30+ years. And security has been a constant theme all the way through those years. So hopefully I can give you some of my experience as part of that journey and take you through a number of things today. A lot of things, as I say, to cover. The role of the centre, definitely put on a pedestal there. I'm not sure it can live up to Gina's expectations, but it's something that we want to try and build in around the centre, that we have that point of contact and a reach out to the expertise that's needed to help people whenever they most need it. Take a short canter through the NCSC board toolkit around board level responsibilities. I think this is key about embedding security within your organization, so that when these things happen, it's just part of your culture. A wee bit about the current threat landscapes, what we're seeing out there, what's happening. Already we hear about ransomware, phishing, and there's no doubt those are the top prevalent threats, but where they're coming from and where we sit within that whole global landscape. How attacks happen, the kind of process that attackers go through, and there's a wee video in there that'll just show you that sort of happening in real, and it's exactly what's happened down south, and exactly what's happened to Gina, and exactly what's happening to a lot of other organizations. So it'll give you a bit of a real life picture on that. Cyber assurance, what do you guys need to do in terms of providing assurance to your organization and also to your suppliers, your customers, your citizens, to try and build that trust that actually we are secure, and what are we asking of our own suppliers? And then what are the expectations of your organizations in terms of resilience and recovery? How do you bounce back? What are you need to prepare, and sort of walk through that? And then some sort of final next steps. What do we need to challenge ourselves to make sure that we are as secure as maybe we think we are? And I like Gina's point. Now, you don't know what you don't know unless you've got another pair of eyes coming in to try and look at this. And I think we do need to change our audit focus, that this is much wider than just finance and fraud. It is a significant risk that needs to be taken in and around sort of the risk and audit sort of responsibilities. So the role of the centre, very simple statement. We aim to make Northern Ireland cyber safe, secure and resilient for its citizens and its business. So Joe and Jane blogs on the street, we want to try and give them enough information that helps them protect you and I in our day and daily lives. Whether you're a small, medium-sized business or whether you're a large international business, we're working to have that right conversation with those bodies in a way that sort of resonates with them. There's not much point me talking about seams and defence in depth to a small retailer because they won't have the resources or the skills to do that, but they may be able to put processes in place and contracts in place to be able to access that. And insurance is going to be a big part of that, I think going forward. So I work to a number of principles within our team. Cyber advocacy. We are the people within Northern Ireland. We want to be, the centre wants to be the general voice for good cybersecurity practice. This is what people should be doing, irrespective of where we are. We want to be that trusted source within Northern Ireland. It's not saying we're providing all of the advice and guidance, but as a portal out to the likes of NCSC, out to Get Safe Online, Scamwise NI, sources where you can actually start to get much more advice and guidance and tailor that to your organisation. In terms of cyber health promotion, just a challenge, constructively challenge public and private sector organisations as to where are they in terms of their level of maturity. And the last one's probably key for me. We want to be almost turkeys voting for Christmas. If we get this right, we want the private and public sector organisations to have this in place, that we almost don't need to be there. This becomes part and parcel of what we do and what way we think. But I think that's going to take a while to do. So we don't want to be part of that delivery process. We want to help people to be sustainable in understanding these risks and keep abreast of them, because it's an ever-changing landscape. The burning question that I'm trying to answer at the minute is how cyber healthy is Northern Ireland? How do you measure the health of a province or a region? It's difficult enough to do that at an organizational level, but how do we do that across our wee island here, as we say? So we're tackling this here from these sort of three perspectives. Define the scope of Northern Ireland in terms of how do we eat this elephant? Define what we mean or should mean by a minimum level of good cybersecurity and safety, and try and impose that out to organisations. And then define expectations of resilience and recovery. And a lot of this isn't us telling people what it should be. It's getting organisations to ask themselves this question, because it's going to be different for different organisations. They're going to have different risk appetites, different sectors, and different ways of dealing with this, but at least have that conversation. The little picture you see there is the WannaCry decrypt. I'm not sure, Gina, if your decrypt key was as flamboyant as that. Normally they're just a text message saying, pay us money or else. So we're currently in the process of trying to baseline this to measure the current levels of cyber health, both from a small business perspective and from a larger organization perspective. We've just completed a small business and voluntary sector survey with Ipsos Mori, which we will publish in due course, and some interesting findings there. And then from that, how do we then plan to improve from this? So that's kind of what the centre's about. Northern Ireland defined by its citizens, businesses and economy. In terms of cyber safety, this is about imparting knowledge to what the cyber threat landscape is and how it applies to a sector or organisation. In terms of cyber security, it's the ability to put in place good practices, processes, how to protect against those current cyber threats that are out there with that knowledge and understanding. And then cyber resilience is about that preparation work and the rehearsing and the stuff that Gina's talked about. You know, how do we deal with something if it happens? What is the worst case scenario? And do we have the right people, processes, contracts in place to be able to deal with that? Northern Ireland is a very simple model of what Northern Ireland is, but it helps us understand where we target our key messages. 1.8 million people, 330,000 of those within school age, and we're currently targeting a number of messages towards skills, cyber skills development, and showing it as a good career. We had an event last night, a careers event last night, where we had a really good response from across Northern Ireland schools. But of the 1.4 odd million left, we have 845,000 people working and 620 odds not working or economically inactive for various reasons. So we have two campaigns. We have a business targeted campaign and we have a societal campaign. In the first year, we'd be very much targeted towards what we term low risk impact areas, small business, voluntary and community sector, building out at scale messaging. And this year, we're very much focusing in and around critical national infrastructure, significant organizations, those higher risk, low volume type conversations. So that's work that we're ongoing at the minute. We issue our messages out through our website. That's just a picture of some of the messages, blogs and e-signs. We've got a Twitter feed. It's a bit out of date. I think we've close to 970 followers now. We really want to break that 1,000. So if you're not following us, follow us. And as of sort of March, a lot of these events have been sort of online webinars out across. We've developed a lot of resources around mobile device security, campaigns that we're delivering. We're going to do a Secure Your Business campaign in the next couple of weeks, and then Secure Your Home campaign later on this year. And we have last year we did a smishing campaign out across social media, primarily digital ad shelters, and this year we're going to do sort of the cyberware sort of key basic cyber hygiene messages, probably from October, autumn time through to the end of March. So that's kind of how we get our messages out there. That's what we're about, and it's about trying to impart good understanding, knowledge, help people put in place good practices, and really try and drive up the bar around Northern Ireland cybersecurity health. But that's about us. What about you guys? So what do boards really need to be taken on board? And I thought I would start with trying to dispel the myth that cybersecurity is some kind of dark art. It's only these specialists that understand it. It's not. It really is what it says in the tin. Cyber is just anything relating to computers. And we would go a step further to say a computer that's connected to the internet. Security is really just being free from danger or threat. So cybersecurity is just anything relating to computers and how you make that free from danger or threat. A couple of points that you might sort of come across. A threat is just a person or thing that's likely to cause you damage. A vulnerability is your exposure or proximity to that threat. So if I'm in San Francisco, I will be quite vulnerable to earthquakes. In Northern Ireland, I'm not. And risk is really just the likelihood that a vulnerability will be exploited and will have a result of some kind of damage. So in essence, cybersecurity is just another form of risk management. And I think that's what I was saying earlier. This is something we need to have within the portfolio of our risk and audit committees now that we are taking this as a significant risk. And you can read the definition there. You know, it really is about managing the vulnerability of an organization's computer systems and data to cyber threats to reduce the likelihood or impact to the organization's ability to operate and function. And it's that last bit I really want to focus in on. This is about the business. This is not about the technology. The technology is a way for you to manage this threat, to reduce the likelihood of something happening. It's a control and potentially to limit the impact and allow you to be able to recover a lot quicker. This is taken from the NCSE board toolkit. You can download it, and I'm going to really canter through these 4 areas, 9 particular focus areas within each. But it really is as simple as this. Simple to say, but maybe not so simple to do in practice. Get the environment right. I don't think that is probably the most prominent thing. Build it into your culture, bake it in to your staff training. Get the information you need to understand where your business faces the most risk. Understand that. Understand how then you can use that information to prioritize your risks. Gina talked about understanding the data that's most valuable, how to protect it, getting the right data that you needed to be able to respond, and then the steps you need to take to manage those down to a level which is acceptable to your organization. And that's where it's over to you. We can't say everything must be down to the minimum level. You might be much more risk open or risk averse depending on your particular board. So embed cybersecurity into the organization. And what we mean by that is basically integrate it into your own risk management processes, into your objectives. Operationally, you rely on technology to deliver your business. You've got emails, you've got applications that deliver services, you've got public facing services. So how does this risk bake into your operational decisions? You may have legal responsibilities in terms of compliance, regulatory frameworks, the ICO was mentioned. So what's your legal obligations in terms of protecting data or delivery of services? In terms of this directive, if your service delivery and you're an operator for essential service falls below a certain level, you have a regulatory obligation to report that through to the competent authority. And in terms of financial risk, you can lose money. I've heard examples of £250,000 being lost in simple mandate redirects or invoice fraud, which we'll talk about later. One off, gone in a split second, and I think about £5,000 was recovered, and that's gone. And that can happen multiple times unless you've got the right processes in place. So it's about embedding this within your own risk management process. Reflected in your structure of your board. Do you have someone from the technical side on your board? A CISO was mentioned. It doesn't have to be a CISO. Someone who actually understands this from a technology perspective and from a threat landscape perspective. And if you don't, do you need to? So just consider that as your own structure at the minute. You're going to hear me repeat this here a few times. Engage with our experts. We can't be experts in everything. In fact, some of these areas are very niche. So talk to your suppliers, talk to the people like CIFRA and others in the industry, understand what your business might need in terms of that expertise. Do you have that within your own organization, or do you need to bake it in? But definitely have that conversation. Most boards do not like talking to technical people, and most technical people don't like talking to boards because there's a miscommunication there. And I think we need to try and build that translation so that boards communicate to technical staff. You need to talk to us in a way that we understand. And the challenge to boards is, look, get a wee bit more technical, and we'll probably come on to that in the next slide here. Baseline your current skills, understand what you do know and understand what you don't know, and get access to that expertise. Understand what you have within your own organization. These skills are costly, and it may be better to invest in training your own staff to be able to understand your business. They're going to understand your business a lot better than most, and they'll be able to advise better if you can invest in them. Develop a positive cybersecurity structure. I'll read through some of this. You set the tone, lead by example. If you find yourself as a board member doing something that's slightly outside of normal policy, then it's highly likely that everyone else is doing the same. So revise the policy. The security policy should be there to enable your business. If it's not doing that, then revise it. It's about balancing that risk. It's not about putting technical constraints and controls in place just because other people are doing it. Balance it for your own organization and take time to build that culture in. Establish your baseline. What's important to you? Gina talked about understanding the critical business areas. What's the critical, just let me bring this on a bit. And keep me right for time here. There's still a wee bit to go through, so I'm really going through this here. If you need me to speed up, I can. Boards need to understand business terms, what's most valuable to them. What are the critical services and functions? What's the critical data? What are the critical processes that understand those? And what's the technology that's needed to make those things work, to oil the wheels? By understanding that, then we can start to have that conversation with the technical teams around what they should be focusing in on from a business perspective, rather than what they believe is much more important, because maybe it's the most sexiest new technology out. Understand what your crown jewels are. What are the things you simply couldn't function with? And those things will help to determine what you need to prioritize and bring it back online. Gina talked about a business impact assessment. By undertaking a business impact assessment, what would happen to the business if you lost this function or process? That will help you prioritize where your crown jewels will be. And again, I'll not go through this here, but it really is about communicating in a language that the technical people understand and can start to prioritize their resources about, and also that they can feed back to you as to maybe the best ways to tackle that sort of business risk problem. So have that conversation and bake that into your decision-making process. Understand the threat. Get an understanding of the threat, and this is probably easier than you think. There are lots of reports out there. You can download them, access them for free. NCSC do a breach report, Verizon, Proofpoint, CrowdStrike. There are lots of others. Look at them and see what the current level of threats are and where the motivations are coming from these threat actors. That'll help you see where your risk levels are. Collaborate with security providers and partners. Talk to ourselves, talk to NCSC, get safe online and understand what's prevalent to your organization and review your threat landscape continually. There's the Cybersecurity Information Security Platform, CISP. If you're not on it, let me know and we can get you signed up to that. NCSC's secure platform for securing the most recent sort of threat information and incident information. So that's there and available to you. Assess the threat. And basically what we're saying there is just understand the motivations behind some of these attackers. And as I said, work with your suppliers and partners. They're more than happy to tell you why these products are needed. But just a wee healthy set of cynicism as to, if you understand your own organization, then you can start to understand what's more applicable to you and what you need in your toolkit. Manage the security risk. Integrate cybersecurity into the risk management process. We've already talked about that in a bit of detail, but it's about also understanding the level of investment. Challenge your tactical folk if they're coming to say, I need a new SIEM, I need a new logging system. Why? What's the return on investment? Why do I need that? How's it managing my risk? How do I reduce that? And there was a phrase used to be once upon a time, you wouldn't spend £1 million protecting a can of cola, but you would spend £1 million to protect the recipe. And likewise, you wouldn't spend £100,000 protecting data that, if compromised or lost, may actually, in terms of total cost and reputation and all, may only be 500,000 because of the level or aggregation of that. So it is about taking a proper management risk-based decision on some of these things, but understanding why you're doing it. Don't make reducing risk levels the measure of success. And this is kind of a wee bit abstract. But what we're saying here is, don't say, look, because we don't have any incidents, we're all right. That's like asking a policeman on the beat to say, look, how many robberies have you stopped because you're on the beat? You can't really answer that question. The same with insurance. You might have home insurance, but have you been burgled or have you had a fire? Well, just because you haven't, would you ditch that home insurance? No. So there is a need to look at risk and how you're managing the risk, and is it a way of decreasing that? Is that a better measure for yourselves? Get a little bit technical. Be able to challenge your technical folk, ask them to prove things to you, ask them to explain things to you, have that conversation and get that understanding so you can understand these risks better. There are the 10 steps. I'll not go through them here, but you will understand it from a business perspective in terms of risk management, asset management, and all they're asking is like understand the technical jargon that goes around them. And I would say if you have a board, get your technical team to do a spotlight and ask them to portray their particular technical piece in the way that you understand it and help conversation. Collaborate with suppliers and partners. And really what I'm trying to highlight at this one is you may be a risk to your supplier and your supplier may be a risk to you. So bake into your contracts some kind of way to provide a level of assurance. What is the security arrangement you want from your suppliers in terms of data management, in terms of integration, in terms of right of audit, in terms of right to expect? You know, are those things baked into your contracts? And vice versa, if I was your supplier, I'd be asking you, listen, are you a risk to me? So you probably find that this is going to be a growing area around a level of assurance that people will demand as we go forward, as these risks become much more prevalent. I'll just bring these through. You know, you can read those yourselves, but you know, 3 questions to ask around: are you a risk or not? Is the product or service that you're buying, does it have security built in, and what's the standards that you're going to be demanding in the future? Plan your response to cyber attacks. Thank you, Gina. You've lined that up for me. I'll quickly go through some of these. Ensure you have a plan. And I would say that a business continuity plan is not the same as a cyber incident response plan. The cyber incident response plan is something that you need to be able to do in that first hour, 4 hours, maybe first few days, to be able to understand the extent of the problem and make sure you've got access to that expertise. Understand your role as a board member within the incident management process, and is there things that you can delegate or are not happy to delegate in terms of decision making. So on the Friday afternoon before bank holiday or on the day before Christmas, will you delegate authority to your incident management team to take a website down, to call in contractors, or do you need to be part of that incident management process? So if you need to be there as part of that decision-making process, then the board need to understand that they need to be on call at Christmas Eve at 6 o'clock, just before sitting down to dinner, to make that decision. Get involved in exercises or rehearsing. Establish playbooks for the likes of ransomware or phishing. And this is that you can actually walk through this stuff and understand it, that it becomes second nature. So we're not scrambling around, and definitely keep it simple. Flow charts, decision-making trees rather than a big document, something that people can lift, understand their role. This is what I need to do, and follow the plan. Drive a no blame culture, especially around incident management and reporting. The sooner someone tells you they've done something wrong, made a mistake, clicked on something they shouldn't, the quicker you can start to look at that incident, contain it, and start to deal with it. If they feel they're going to be threatened or disciplined, it's likely it's going to pervade without you knowing it until someone else does report it. Just something to be, there's a thing called dwell time, and Gina touched on it a wee bit. I think 6 or 7 weeks, Gina, they were brute force attacking maybe CBOOP. IBM have reported that it's probably 139 days on average that an attacker will be in your system. So they know exactly what you're doing. They're gathering information. They know when to hit you, know where your vulnerabilities are. They've probably already planned a lot of the response that they want to take your systems down to cause you the most pain so that they get the most bang for their buck. Awful way to put it, but you know, that's kind of the MO that's happening at the minute. So the quicker you can detect stuff, either technically through automated response or through somebody telling you, then the better you are in terms of containing that and responding. The current threat landscape, and I don't think there'll be any surprises here, but one thing here is the integrated review from the UK government has put cybersecurity right up there with their Apache helicopters and submarines. Cybersecurity, there's a new cybersecurity force being established by the military. So it's right up there in terms of a significant risk globally. I've copied this little response out. Just as you can see from CISA, it's equivalent to NCSC, but US and allied networks, including national security and government-related systems. And that equally applies to their partners, such as UK, and allies. So these are attacks that are continually being reported that people need to be cognizant of. So in terms of UK threat level, I've just put a wee quote up there from Hackney County Council, who were a significant attack, and obviously we knew about SEPA. But government, public sector, government, definitely, if you've got a .gov account, consider yourself a target. Heightened activity in terms of education as well, research institutions, because of geopolitical leverage that can have for other nations to be able to gather that research. We continually see these. I'll not go through these in any great detail, but Kent, coronavirus in terms of research, Newcastle University was hacked, London Hackney, our own Scottish Environment Protection Agency, Redcar in Cleveland still recovering, Bedfordshire school pupils coursework. So I mean, to understand the difficulty here in terms of our exams. Obviously, recent one around US fuel pipeline, £5 million paid in ransom there. Not sure that's ethical, but decision they took, they were really slammed in the east coast of America. In terms of Northern Ireland threat landscape, it's very similar to to the UK, but we are seeing them here. TransLink was hit. I haven't put yours up, Gina. I don't think you hit the news, which is good, which is just to shows around the communication piece. But Queen's University, again, still recovering from their attack. Arden North Down Council, and obviously we know the one in the Republic of Ireland, the most significant attack on health service in the Irish state. So look, these things are happening as we speak. This is some things that we can put in place. Very basic things can actually make a big difference. End user education. If you look at the top two, phishing attacks and others impersonating organizations in emails or online. So identity theft by any other term. Ransomware, I would say, comes in probably under some kind of phishing or other attack, in that phishing is normally used as a way to deploy ransomware. But if you have end users educated, at-risk personnel, so people dealing with finance, understanding the challenge if invoices or accounts are likely to be changed by suppliers, strong passwords in terms of 3 random words, longer the better, two-factor authentication. If you can deploy two-factor authentication, do, especially on your elevated privileges, administrative accounts, email accounts. If you have cloud services, definitely on cloud services. So if you can put in two-factor authentication, really worthwhile and should be looked at. Timely patching and updates. So antivirus and endpoint security in terms of detection and secure configuration. So those are basic cyber hygiene practices that should be within any organization. Social engineering, and this I'll talk about this. Social engineering is by far what we're seeing as the main attack vector, which really means all of that investment in firewalls and spam filters and antivirus at the firewall end, at the internet end, they just come through all of that because they're using your staff as the means of attack. And as you can see here, it's just a way to manipulate individuals into doing something that they shouldn't do for malicious intent. This is phishing or smishing, and it's the same thing. It's trying to get somebody to do something just through different channels. Phishing is through email. Phishing is a phone call. You probably get a phone call saying, I'm from HMRC, or we see something on your computer, can we talk to you and get in? And smishing is just through SMS or text messaging. Exactly the same objective, to steal your data or your credentials to either use as a compromise or to sell on for others to use to compromise your organization. This is something in terms of invoice redirection or mandate for it, particularly important for anyone who would be changing suppliers' details or accounts. So for your Finance staff, this is something that they should be able to challenge anybody. So normally what happens is they get an email from a compromised email address, usually from the CEO, Gina, saying, listen, I'm out on a plane. I really need you to change this, pay this invoice to a supplier, or they'll default on a contract or some other story. They do it because it's senior email coming through and they don't challenge it and the money's gone. But there's usually some kind of normal interaction happening between you and your suppliers. The attacker's already in your systems. They're monitoring this communication. And at some point, they will compromise that person's email address. So whether it's a senior executive or a finance person or the supplier asking you for a new contract, they will then impersonate that person, come up with some kind of story to say, we just had an audit or we just had something. We are now changing our account because of advice. Can you now pay this to this account? And it's at this point that your person should be picking up the phone and saying, is this right? And that's a simple way to mitigate against this. If they pick the phone up and challenge this, then they can stop it in its tracks. If they go ahead, then they will lose the money, and it's probably highly likely they will not recover that money. It will be gone out of that account within minutes. And it's happening all the time. A lot of it in conveyancing and the legal firms and that are house purchases are just money's gone. So how attacks happen? I'm going to stop for a few minutes and hopefully this video will come up and I'll let you hear it.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. Katie, are you on your way to the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Give me a call when you get this. Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that they'll...
Pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us.
They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicart is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed
customers.
lower today, led by Qualicart, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell to a
acknowledged.
new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
So very sobering. Gina, I hope it didn't bring back memories for what happened, but I think you get a sense of the panic there. It's a wee bit false in that they just bounced back and then they found that the data was gone. One thing that I find about that video is there is absolutely no technical skill needed to execute it. It's done from a cafe shop, from a cafe over their Wi-Fi. It's crime as a service. They've bought the kit and they've just done a wee bit of research in terms of reconnaissance, knowing exactly how to target that organization, and with devastating results. And that's par for the course. We're seeing a number of attacks happening with Word documents with macros enabled. Seems to be quite prevalent, and a way to deploy ransomware. Someone will open it and not even know anything has happened, close it again and probably shrug it off and move on. Someone's now in your system, and unless you have a way of detecting that, they will use that. They would use that then to start the kill chain, as we call it. Threats of the WHO. Know your enemy. Anyone who knows Sun Tzu, know your enemy. Understand the motivations behind why these attackers do what they do, and does that apply? Are they more of a threat or less of a threat to your organization? So we talk about nation states. They're big, some of them are big into research, technology research, AI, big data. If you're in that space, then it's more likely they're going to be more of a threat to you than if you're not. The biggest threat area is cyber criminality, either targeted or untargeted, and you can be a victim of either. They just want money, they want leverage, they want ransom. It's all about getting the most money out of a person and out of an organization. Hacktivists are usually motivated by some kind of political or statement, and hackers are usually there for the status. Just want some kudos. I've been able to get into NSA or FBI or whatever. The two on the right, although we're often forgot about, suppliers, either inadvertently putting something on your organization's network, or the way the services that they provide to you are not secure enough, or your employees, because they have too much access and not really sure what they can do with it, or disgruntled employees, as we know. But sometimes it's more just accidental damage or accidental configuration with people who haven't been trained in the level of permissions or access that they have. This is normally how it happens. Reconnaissance. This is from the Lockheed Martin kill chain. Reconnaissance, they will look to see how they can best attack your organization. Normally that's looking at your technology stack, looking at the type of organization you are. How can we manipulate your staff or your suppliers? If they find a way, then they will weaponize that by putting some kind of malware on. Find the best method of delivery, whether it's email or even the USB, less of USB now, but usually email or social engineering, or through some kind of vulnerability that's been left unpatched or open. They then use that exploit to elevate privileges and create persistence. And what that means is, I now have a way to move across your organization undetected. I will probably change logs if I can, so that you don't see that I'm there. and I will create a way for me to continually get back in should you close the loopholes that allowed me to get in the first place. Install the malware, take the data, prepare my exploit, and then basically do what I wanted to do, whether that's steal information, gather intelligence, or create some kind of ransomware attack to get money. NCSC have distilled these stages into 4: survey, delivery, breach, and effect, which they then produce this. And it's really this here piece that I wanted to get to. You can download this. We'll send the links out as part of the event here. But challenge your IT people on how they are protecting your organization at each of these stages. What have you got in place that helps you mitigate the level of threat and risk at each of these stages of the kill chain? This is another view, and a very good, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. There's a lot of stuff here, you can't read it, but this is documented evidence as to the number of attacks that have happened, how they go about, and this is just a different way of presenting how an attacker goes through a particular process. And what I wanted to highlight here, excuse me a sec. What I wanted to highlight here was this piece here, and that's the initial access. There's only a number, I think it's 10 here, 10 ways of which people have been documented to get in. And the MITRE ATT&CK provides a number of mitigations, which you can have a conversation with your IT folk as to what level of mitigations have been put in place. But if you can manage the risks around these, then anything else on the right-hand side, unless you have an insight or a threat, goes away. And one of the big things is good staff training, 2-factor authentication, and good supplier management or supply chain management. We'll take an awful lot of these out of the picture or reduce them significantly.
Joe, if you don't mind, if I could jump in just at that point, because I'm conscious
I'm just constant.
Yeah, we're way over time, but I think a measure of how compelling this is that everyone is still with us, but I'm conscious that we're coming into lunchtime. We've had some.
Give me 3 minutes to wrap it up.
Great. Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Okay, so we're nearly there, Anne. So I appreciate everybody hanging on here. Really, how secure and resilient are you? This is where I want. It's almost a call out. I want us to nail our colours to the mast and say, as an organisation, we will be demonstrable in the level of security that we have, and whether that's the basic level at Cyber Essentials, or whether it's right up here at ISO 27001 or something in between. We tend to do our pen tests, which is technology. We've done our vulnerability assessments, but does it really test our people and our processes, which are critical to the business? Cyber resilience is different than the DR and redundancy. Think about how you can detect early and isolate an infection, how you can investigate and remediate this quite quickly, and how you can safely recover. I'll not go through this. It's really a wee bit more around preparing for business continuity, and similarly here. But you set the levels. It's the board that sets the levels of response, assurance that you need. We have done some work with the large organizations, and only 40% have a cyber incident response plan, of which when tested had significant gaps. And I think that's fair to say. These are the things that I want you to take away with you. Do you know your business priority functions, and do your technical teams know what they are? Do you know how long that they can be out of action before it becomes critical, really starts to hurt you and your organization, your customers? Do you know the people, processes, and IT applications that underpin these? And do you have a level of assurance, and I mean real assurance, that these services are protected? And for the auditors in the room, trust, yes, but verify. Look for the evidence. And if you're going to do ISO 27001 or any of those standards, they will ask for the evidence. Have you a cyber incident plan? And if you have you tested it? And I mean really tested it? Have a good board level representation and communication with the technical teams? Do you know your critical suppliers, internal as well as external? And have you had a conversation with them around security and assurance? Have you tested or validated how they may impact your security? And how are you protecting access to your critical systems? Invest in multi-factor or 2-factor authentication. understand your enemy, understand that threat landscape. And I have 3 asks from you guys, or 4. Be demonstrable in your level of security. Independent verification to a recognized standard that you choose. Know you're prepared. Develop a cyber incident response plan and test it. Recover, plan your recovery from the worst case, and have the right expertise on hand, contract that you need, and engage with us to start that conversation or develop that conversation, and we're more than happy to do that. So look, apologies for overrunning. It's a lot of stuff to cover, but it's all necessary, and I tried to strip it down. So more than happy to work with the guys here.
I'll unmute myself. Joe, thank you so much for a real tour de force there around the issues that we need to really take seriously. We are significantly over time. I've had a lot of interaction here on the chat. I think it's come mainly to me, and just huge appreciation from everyone in the audience for both Joe and Gina for what you've brought to us today. I will pick up directly with the Department of Finance the issue, Seamus, that you raised from the SEUPB point of view on access to CISP. Aldrina, down in the Southern Trust, thank you for raising the point around how we build confidence and trust in going digital, because there's so much benefit there, but you know, a lot to take into consideration before we feel confident and safe on the digital platforms. We will be keeping in contact with Joe as you develop your offering over the next year. I know there's a number of initiatives that you're working on that will be of particular interest to our members. So we'll absolutely bring those to members as they become available. And as a first step, we'll be circulating both sets of slides from today. So a huge thank you to everyone for sticking with us. I think a really important and really valuable session this morning. And I'll hand back over to David now for a final word of thanks before we go.
Okay, yeah, look, that was a really valuable session, and you know, I think it has raised quite a lot of issues. And I think as I put in the chat there, you know, Joe has highlighted a number of things, that a number of questions we should ask ourselves. But I think every one of us needs to really ask ourselves, you know, if we were subject to a ransomware attack and we were told that at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning, would we know what we had to do? And you know, I think that's a question that, you know, all boards should address. I think Joe makes a very good point about the need for this to be seized at the board level. And I think we probably have in the past had quite rightly, a very strong emphasis on governance and particularly on governance over finances. But I think we probably do need to spend more time at board level just looking at the extent to which we're ready to deal with cyber attacks. So I think this is an issue that is probably worth some further work by CEF and others. I think there's plenty of issues have been raised here which we could look at in more depth. I'm conscious that a number of questions were asked, and it's probably just worth saying if anybody has a burning question or point which they would like to make before we conclude, probably worth just allowing people to do that. If you could stick your hand up, if anybody. No, I don't see anything. So, and have I missed anything just before we sign off?
No, as you said, David, I think a lot of issues raised here today, and I think we can bring a lot of value from the collective perspective because we're all facing the same issues. So we will certainly be back to members with more on this theme over the coming months. And thank you very much for sticking with us.
Yes, and special thanks to Gina and to Joe for the time they've given us today. So thanks, everybody. See you soon.
And thanks. And if I can be of help to anybody, please don't hesitate. If you want me to scare a board into taking some action, I'm perfectly happy to do that. Bye.
Thanks, Gina.
Likewise. Thanks, everybody, for your time.